fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction. Fiction. Fiction.
All right. Phantasmagorical salutations, all you cognonauts out there. Welcome back to Exofathom, the podcast that dares to explore the outer reaches of human thought and understanding. I'm your host, Nick, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Ayla.
Hello. Every time.
Yes.
Just one hello.
Hello.
Don't get me started.
Well, everybody, we wanted to take a break from our Project Gateway Experience series just to do something to mix it up a little bit. We were both feeling a little bit antsy about going back into that really, dense document again on Friday. So we thought that we might do a little palate cleanser for you guys and get into the weird, mystical world of ghosts.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I've been waiting to do that all day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we're going to get into it. Let's see. I have had my fair share of ghost encounters in my life. And we're probably going to get into some personal stories here in a minute. But I think I was going to do just a little brief outline of what the Wikipedia entry for ghosts is, because I'm basic and I couldn't find a more succinct explanation than Wikipedia. So I'm just going to go for it. And here it says, in folklore, a ghost, sometimes known as an apparition, haunt, phantom, poltergeist, shade, specter, spirit, spook, and wraith, is the soul or spirit of a dead person or animal that can appear to the living. The belief in existence of an afterlife, as well as manifestations of spirits of the dead, is widespread, dating back to animalism and ancestor worship in pre-literature cultures. That's kind of wordy, but I think we've all had an experience or two that's raised the hairs on the back of our neck before, something that we couldn't quite explain. So I think I'm just going to leave it there for the intro and then see what Ayla has to say on that. I've been kind of doing some reading about ghosts, and we'll give you some fun factoids along the way.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So we've made this decision to talk about ghosts, maybe yesterday, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, naturally, I couldn't sleep last night, and I was laying there thinking about ghosts. Not that I think that this house is haunted, but I thought about it, and I just thought, gosh, what if I was in a house that was truly haunted, like it had poltergeist level events? I don't even know how somebody would cope with that. And I got to thinking, because I've had my fair share of paranormal experiences, but I don't know exactly what it is. I did a little bit of research before this, and everything I came up with was anti-ghost. It was how the science explains it all away.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started going a little more fringe, and I think it's still really interesting to note that there are, even though a scientist can say, no, we have all the answers, you're still going to find another one that's going to say, well, actually, it could be this other thing. And so, I think that just talking about ghosts, at least in our, like in the definition said, the lore, the mythology, it's definitely played an interesting role in fiction. And so I kind of went off the deep end on that end. So, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've got at least two different sides to it that I can bring. And I'd love to hear maybe one of your personal stories first, just to kind of talk a little bit about what it's like to see a ghost.
Oh, we'll get into that, but I'm going to probably give a little bit more fun factoids and bits of information before we get into our personal experiences. And then I think after we talk about our personal experiences, we can get into what possible explanations might be. Because yeah, you're right. I think upon looking and just reading some stuff, and outside of my own personal experience, I don't read very much about ghosts, but it didn't surprise me at all that most of what you get is a debunking of what it is. And I think that that's merely because we base our knowledge around a scientific observation in our our five senses in our third dimensional world. So I think that when we find more and more anomalies within our reality, which we are, and we'll probably have conversations about that in the future. I feel like we can't shoo it away so easily anymore, especially if we're talking about parallel dimensions and who knows, God particles and stuff like that, and the fabric of the universe and fractalization. Like if all of these things that we find in quantum physics and astrophysics and macrocosmic anomalies and microcosmic anomalies, if those things are happening, then I think that would probably suggest that there is more to the whole ghost thing than perhaps science would lead us to believe.
Yeah, I mean, well, like I said, I was doing a little bit of research, and once I got past just kind of looking up like ghost theories and theories around ghosts and kind of all the people that debunk those stories, I did start to get more into wondering, why are some of our greatest literary books like, like Hamlet, Macbeth, A Christmas Carol, the Canterville Ghost, like there's always a ghost that's going to pop up in our fiction. So I think that
this is the archetype of death,
yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a very sobering archetype.
And it kind of, it can talk about like morality. It talks about, the hereafter and carpe diem kind of, like it solicits that like, oh yeah, this is like you have a short period of time here. So I think that that's really interesting, one, to note, just because if, the mind makes things real, or if the mind is filtering our experience, then all this background information of, where we've come and the stories that were written, that's going to play a factor for sure. But then you get into like neutrinos and particle physics, and ghost particles, and the complete insanity that is matter and antimatter, and lack of symmetry in the universe. Like, like you said, I think we've gotten so far that we think we know a lot, but it could always be this extra layer that just boom takes everything else off the plate, and then you have all these new theories for sure.
Well, yeah, I think we're always kind of one discovery away from knowing nothing. So
yes, I love that.
It's probably pretty accurate for that. But yeah, okay. So I was in the intro, I had mentioned that the belief in spirits of the dead is widespread, and it's been dated back to animism or ancestor worship. Now, I looked up animism, and it's from Latin anima, which means breath or spirit or life. Pardon me. The belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Potentially, animism perceives all things: animals, plants, rocks, rivers, weather systems, handiwork, and perhaps even words, as animated and alive. Animism is used in the anthropology of religion as a term for the belief system of many indigenous peoples, especially in contrast to relatively more recent developments of organized religion. And I think that's kind of cool. It basically would seem to me that the spirit world has been tied with us ever since our very early days of congregating and speaking with each other and communicating ideas. And I also kind of like animism. I like the idea of animism. I think that's pretty cool. Reminds me a lot of, the Force and Star Wars, or some obviously Native American philosophies hold this sort of idea as well.
Yeah, Oh yeah, no, I think, animism, um, it's interesting because, well, I mean, like, that's all I knew growing up, is that you're praying to like the earth, and you have different animal characters that can serve as totems, or they can carry your prayers to a higher place and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, think about the world in that regard, where
Mhm.
everything has its own soul and spirit in a way. I think
Yeah.
that the world becomes a much more magical place. And it doesn't surprise me that modern man had to de-animalize so much of the natural world in order to then plow it down, like build a bunch of stuff on it. So I think that's interesting to see how action can create a suppression of a certain belief system or not. I mean, I don't really know. How do you have thoughts on how things evolved out of animism, or why that was dropped?
I think at a certain point, I mean, I would venture to guess that animism was probably one of the first religions. Or yeah, I mean, I'm certain it is. The Green Man is one of the oldest gods that has been sort of recorded, especially in like Celtic civilizations thousands of years ago. And that had to do with animism and nature having its own spirit. And but I think along the way we kind of separated ourselves from nature. So the less we lived in nature, the more we industrialized, the more we utilize nature as a tool instead of living with it in a sort of symbiosis. Once we started taking advantage of nature, then it really no longer suited us to have the mentality that we are a part of nature, because one could not do the things that we did if we had the philosophy that we are tied to nature in any way. You would look at oil barons and railroad magnates as monsters if that were the case.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I think that's spot on. You have to kind of like, on one hand, justify, but also there's that conqueror mentality too. So it's like a conquering of the natural world. And I just wonder where that might have come from, because you think about humans who live in symbiosis with their surroundings, they might not think, oh, you know what would be really cool is if I didn't have to fear that lion or that tiger or whatnot. At what point in civilization did some humanoids say, no, we're going to be the apex predator, and we're going to continue to do these different things to control our environment? I mean, I don't know if it was any one person, but you know what I mean? Like, just that idea of having a reality and then thinking, I want to change this. And then how that creates this whole new path of existence that's completely different from where we started out.
Certainly. Well, I mean, I'm sure there are many answers to that, especially
Oh, of
throughout
course.
especially throughout history. Um, but yeah, I just thought that was pretty cool concept, the idea of animism. And let's see further. Wanted to add, some people believe the ghost or spirit never leaves Earth until no one there is no one left to remember the person who died. Now, I don't know if you've had any, and I know that you have your culture has certain rituals and regulations about people passing and stuff.
Oh, we're
Um,
paranoid.
what's that?
We're totally paranoid about death. It's
Oh
weird.
yeah, exactly. But I think it's kind of interesting, that concept of well, the true death is being forgotten, right?
Mhm. Well, and it goes back to what you were saying before about animism. You added also in there the concept of ancestors.
Hmm.
That like, I know in, okay, full disclosure, I'm thinking of Mulan, but like in that movie, and I imagine in the culture, you would pray to your ancestors for luck or for inspiration. Um, and even in a lot of like new age talk these days, I'm hearing more and more about calling your ancestors or things like that. And for Navajos, I never really connected the term ancestor, but like, we pray to a couple of different folks, and one of them are the Diendinee, which are the holy people, which are just those that have passed on that are looking over. So I think that um, it's interesting because, yeah, like, if you become an ancestor, like let's say I die and then I'm someone else's ancestor, yeah, they are going to remember me every time they pray. They're going to kind of call me up in some roundabout way. And I don't know. I
You
mean,
better hope that you don't have a needy descendant. That's for sure.
trying to get some peace. Stop
Yeah.
calling my name.
How annoyed would you be if you had some, descendant,
Well,
like
I mean, assuming
constantly
I'm in a
praying
good
to you?
place.
Can you help me with my homework?
Well, and then like imagine heaven and hell exists, right? So then like you're in heaven and you're chilling out happy, and then you have to
Yeah.
come down and
Either way, you
deal
don't
with
want to
mortal
answer,
issues.
right? Either
Well,
you're in heaven enjoying yourself, or you're in hell and you got other things to do.
yeah, but if you're in hell, you get to take a break. You're like, nope, sorry, I got a break.
No, I think
You're
you have to
calling me.
stay in hell and just be on the phone with them, right?
Oh, that
Deal
would
with
be so sad. Yes, I'm over here getting tortured, but let me, yes, pray to me more about how you want those shoes or something
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
But I think
Well, I think
that's
it's pretty
go ahead,
cool.
sorry.
That ancestral system. I think it's interesting that it's very exclusive to Native and then Asian cultures. And maybe African cultures too. I don't know too much about specific African cultures, but it doesn't
Well,
seem to be a European thing at all, which is
yeah, no,
interesting.
I don't know. I would have to definitely do a little more research into that because it is interesting
But
to
all
think.
the ghosts seem European. So what's going on?
No, because like in Latin America, or Central America and South America, you can see a big range of different like ghost stories that come out. And in some of the indigenous cultures, I think they do pray to ancestors. Maybe it's just something like an old school. Well, yeah, like in you were reading the definition, like old school religions have ancestors and spirits, and then all of a sudden we funneled it down to like a really organized religion and
Right. Well, maybe
ghosts.
it's the move from polytheism to monotheism. You don't need your ancestors anymore because you have God, right?
Yeah, but then
God
I'm
answers all
wondering,
prayers.
can we get like a collective of people from like thousands of years ago? Let's just get them in a room and ask them, like, do you have ghosts or are your ghosts just your ancestors and they're like
Yeah.
your homies?
Well, I think I was referring to the ghosts being European thing because if you think about it, all of them are like European white people, especially in the more modern, ghosty things. It's not like you see a
Ghosty things,
yeah.
yes.
It's not like you see like a Asian ghost in America somewhere. Why is that?
Yeah, well, no, I know. I mean, that's a really good point. I was just watching on YouTube. It's like 101 ghost stories, and every single one of them, I only got to like 27, but at least 1 through 27 was white. You're
Yeah.
100% right. Like, what is that about? Well,
Why are white people
okay.
sticking around for the
No, okay, so I think somewhere in like the 19, God, what, like, maybe it was the 1800s. I just read this the other day, and it was before we did this podcast. So I didn't like catalog it where I should have, but it was something about how like richer white ladies would have these like
Oh
seances
yeah.
in
We
their
were talking about
houses.
that.
Right, like
Yeah.
where did that come up? Were you watching something or?
No, I think we were just having a conversation, but I think it was just there was a craze back in the early or 1800s, late 1800s, early 1900s, where affluent white women basically got really into the occult. So they got really into seances. They got really into psychics and mediums and
Tarot,
ghosty
crystal
stuff.
balls.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that all of the ghosts are kind of from that era. So maybe the obsession, like, well, we can get into the causes later on in the episode, but maybe the obsession with the occult created some sort of impression upon the fabric of space-time. That's the reason we only see ghosts from the 1800s and not some, kid with wheelies on or Heelys or whatever.
Right. Yeah, you never see a modern day ghost like sporting,
Yeah.
I don't know, Kanye West shit or
Yeah,
something
someone got
like that.
Yeezys on. Yeah, you're
You
not
don't
seeing
see
a
that.
ghost with Kanye swag, that's for sure.
Right. And also what are all these white affluent ghosts doing? Meanwhile, like all the indigenous ghosts, like where are they at? Are they just like busy at work answering our prayers, or is it like
Maybe.
yeah, I don't
Some of the white
understand.
ghosts are on vacation. That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, they found a
Sounds
loophole.
about
They're
right.
like, I'm not gonna go to hell. I'm just gonna chill. Just gonna chill over here.
All right. Well, we're getting off the
Television,
rails here,
television.
but
Yeah, sorry. I'm half white too, so I can say these
yeah.
things. Just
And so let's see. I was trying to look up the first sort of like recording or the first thought of or understood account of ghosts. And I could really only get so far, but apparently there are many references to ghosts in Mesopotamian religions, the religions of Sumer, Babylon, and Assyria, and early states in Mesopotamia. And Mesopotamia is one of the earliest develops of the Neolithic Revolution from around 10,000 BC. So potentially ghosts and accounts of ghosts have been around for 12,000 years.
goodness. It's a
Yeah,
lot of ghosts.
that's a
But
lot
you
of
would think
ghosts. And where do they all
you would think
go?
there would be more. Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, like when you get into the logic of how ghost populations must work, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Because I've had my ghosty experiences, but then I also have my like logical side that's just kind of like, no, there's no way. Because
Well, I
if
think we
we
can get into explanations towards the end, but yes, there is
I'm ready.
definitely, I think there are some explanations that might cover it, but there are some more so very logical Occam's razor style explanations as well. So
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah. All right. So since we did the little intro here and I gave you some fun facts, I think maybe we can get into our personal ghost stories. I
Sure.
have one, but want to tell yours first?
Sure. Okay, so I was a weird kid. Now, I haven't had a lot of ghost sightings recently, or if I do, I just chalk it up to this like stigmatism that I have. Like, you get those eye floaters. So I
Hmm.
always see something out of the corner of my eye, but I know it's my eye floater. But when I was a kid, I saw a lot of ghosts, and I don't know what that was about. Mostly, it wasn't so much seeing them as just feeling that like dark, ominous presence in the room.
Hmm.
So, for instance, I was the youngest, and so I would often get sent to bed way early. And so I could hear everybody laughing and having a good time in the living room. And here I am in this dark, dark room all by myself, and it's quiet. And the other fun thing is that my aunt bought me this like porcelain doll that freaked me out, but my parents wouldn't get rid of, so it just sat in the closet. And I would just sit there and I could feel like there was something in the room. I felt like the doll could come at me at any minute. It just was like terror.
Hmm.
And then, so that was just my like nightly routine. And then every now and then I would wake up and there was like a sound that had woken me up or something. And this one particular time, I absolutely could not stay in the bedroom. So I ran into the living room crying, and my mom woke up and she said, we'll say a prayer and we'll start the day. But when she went into the kitchen, that's exactly when I saw this like dark, shadowy figure. Like it was like walking. It was kind of like watching somebody walk across a hallway. But midway, it stopped and it turned, and I could see that it had looked at me. And I just screamed bloody murder, and then it walked into the room.
Hmm.
Now, a couple weeks later, my sister had a dream that a little girl was in the room and that she was throwing a ball in the room by herself. And then all of a sudden, like the ball was returned to her. So we just had a lot of like weird, spooky situations at this one house when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But the most biggest ghost memory I have was just literally watching it walk across the way. And to this
Hmm.
day, I don't know how to explain it. I know what I saw. I saw it. And I'm not schizophrenic. Like I don't see things often. So I don't know what that was. But then it was really weird because my mom said her prayer and then we drove to my cousin's house and got into a really horrific car accident that morning. So I don't know too. Like, was it? I don't know. I don't know what it was.
Maybe the spirit world bleeding over a little bit.
I don't know, man. And then like we had that house. Ooh, I don't know. I'm getting chills just thinking about it because
Hmm.
you have to think about like that. You know that quintessential was the movie Signs, that M. Shyamalan movie.
Mm-hmm.
And remember when you first see the alien, it's like caught on the news, and of course it does the thing where it walks really slow and then it stops and then it turns and then it keeps on walking. Um,
Yeah, I think that was just terrible CGI.
yeah, okay, but that's exactly what I saw, except kind of like take the alien away and like fuzz it out into like this shadowy thing.
Yeah.
Which you could say it was one of those shadow figures for whatever
Oh
it is.
well.
But
Yeah.
that's a whole other story. So I don't
Yeah.
know, but
That's
that's
its
kind
own
of
episode. Actually, and just to not bury the lead, my ghost story also has a shadow person. So
oh, do tell, do tell.
yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think it's possible that perhaps there was some sort of some sort of bleed over into, and we'll get into explanation. So let me not get ahead of myself. But I think for mine, I have two. One is very brief, which I will tell you happened more recently in my adult years. One happened when I was a kid. The one that happened in my adult years is easily explainable. It was sleep paralysis. And I get it occasionally. It doesn't happen all that often, but I know why it happens, actually. And it was because I went to sleep with my binaural beats in my ear.
Mm.
And so throughout, and if you're listening to our Project Gateway experience, you know what binaural beats are because that's what the whole thing is about. So I usually, sometimes I'll go to bed listening to them just to kind of like, chill my brain out. But it was interesting. In my dream, I was going through and I just kept hearing a noise in my head. And it was annoying me. And in my dream, I just kept saying, what the hell is that noise? What is that noise? To the point where I actually woke myself up, but I was still asleep. My body was still asleep. So I had sleep paralysis. I couldn't move my body whatsoever. My eyes were open, but my body was going because like my nervous system was trying to move my body, but I just couldn't. And I opened my eyes and I'm like, trying my best to move. And it's like, I basically just can't move any part of your body. All I could do was look over to the side of my bed, and there was a not giant, I'd say 7 foot, 8 foot shadow monster
Oh
with
God,
red eyes, speaking in
nope,
tongues,
no,
speaking in an incantation that I could
no.
only surmise was some sort of demonic language. But yeah,
Jesus.
like it was terrifying, and I was doing my best to try to get myself out of that situation. But it's like I couldn't even, like, my eyes, I could barely blink because they were just open, and I just couldn't move. And it lasted for
Oh no,
probably
so you just had to stare at it
yeah
because your
until it
eyes
kind of
couldn't.
just like
Oh my God,
dissipated. Everything kind of dissipated once I got the function of my body back. But
I'm
um,
gonna cry. That's so scary. No,
yeah, it's really
I could
freaky.
not survive that experience. I would have a heart attack. Oh
Oh,
no.
it was terrifying. I have a lot of really terrifying stories that I just never told anybody because I feel like people will think I'm crazy. So, yeah, that was one of them, and I understand what that is. It's obviously sleep paralysis, which I've had a couple times, and they're always bizarre, and it has to deal with something hovering over you or right next to you, and it's usually an ominous presence. So I think that could actually explain a lot of ghost experiences. Same thing with UFO experiences, alien experiences. I think that a lot of that is sleep paralysis. Now, I think we should definitely do an episode on sleep paralysis because I don't necessarily, just because I say like, oh yeah, it can be explained. Well, we don't necessarily understand what the sleep paralysis is doing. Our brain is active, but our body isn't. Where is that middle space that we go to?
Okay,
Um,
I'm gonna interrupt you there
yeah.
for 2 seconds because I was watching this neuroscientist talk about shared experiences and how like you've got your inner experience and your outer experience,
Mm-hmm.
and so much of our consciousness is subjective and reality is just whatever we all agree on, right?
Right.
So now take this for grain of salt. You had this sleep paralysis dream of a shadowy figure with red glowing eyes. I had a friend that I remember called me like at 3 a.m. or something, like just crying her eyes out.
Mhm.
And it was the exact same thing that you mentioned, that she was asleep and then all of a sudden she actually felt something like on her feet. And it almost felt like, imagine you're just playing around, someone's sleeping, and you decide to crawl up them. You're not using your legs, but you're using your arms to like
Right.
shimmy
Yeah.
up their body. And so she said she couldn't move. And when she finally saw what it looked at her, red glowing eyes, and it jumped back, went into the corner of the room.
Mm.
She couldn't move. It was like the same thing, stare down.
Yep.
And then I think she was screaming and didn't even realize it. Her sister ran in.
Yeah.
And
That's what's
no,
fucked up. Just so sorry, I just remembered. I was trying to scream, but all I could go was
that's what I was going to say.
yeah.
She didn't scream. There was a gunshot down the block because someone had been murdered, and the sister came in because she was worried about her sister, my friend.
Mhm.
And so she didn't scream, but it was that whole thing of like, well, someone was murdered, and then this entity's trying to like climb its way into her body. Now, it could be sleep paralysis. It could also be carbon monoxide poisoning, which I found out today can cause auditory hallucinations, chest
Mhm.
pressure, and a feeling of doom. However, when you start looking at shared outer experiences and we have more and more having a collective reality, you have to kind of start wondering, why are we all, if we're all having sleep paralysis, why are we all coming up with the same creepy figure and the
Right.
same creepy
Yeah.
eyes? You know, like, what's that
Mhm.
about? So then
Well,
that's
I
where my
think
mind
it's
spins.
got to be some sort of deep-rooted archetype that lives dormant in our like ancient psyche. If you think about it, it's the dark with eyes, right? So the dark is the first. It
Mm.
was our original, adversary.
Well, and the Navajo have a whole monster that its only thing that it does, it just stares at you. It stares at you to death. It's like
Yeah,
this
well,
whole
I can
monster.
believe that. That sounds
Mhm.
terrifying.
Yeah, it's awful.
But no, I think yeah, because the dark was our first, monster when we were cave people, dwelling in
Mhm.
caves or, small, I don't know, lean ever in our prehistoric eras. There were predators everywhere, and predators hunt at night. And so night, the first true danger that man experienced, I think. And so
Mhm.
there could be something to that since it's such a deep archetype, it manifests itself in these moments, and that's why we see shadow people. I don't know. I mean, it's also possible that we're also seeing some sort of alternate dimension or something like that. Like, I don't know. It's very possible. We can get into that in a minute, but I will tell you my fully awake daytime experience now.
Oh no. Daytime. That never
Yeah.
happens. It's
Now
always at
this one
night.
happened
Don't you
a lot
understand?
longer ago. I think it was probably around 16. Now, I had a death in my family around that time that was quite traumatic for our family and for the person that passed away as well. And we were living in this house, and the house on its own at nighttime, it was one of those. It was just an old 1920s home, but it was big, and it had like hardwood floors, and there was just every noise at night just was amplified throughout the house. So I was already queued up for thinking that house was creepy and haunted, and I used to have friends sleep over all the time. And we would hear footsteps coming down the stairs, and we would think it would be like my stepdad or my mom, because we used to stay up late and play video games and stuff and be sneaky. But we
Be
would
sneaky.
constantly hear footsteps coming down the stairs, and each time we would go to the stairs, like there would be nobody there, and it'd be at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're playing video games or something. And my friends, they had spent the night at my house countless amounts of times when I was a kid. And they experienced it with me almost every time they were there. They would hear something coming down the stairs or hear something
Mhm.
walking around, and there would be. So we already had this understanding that this house was kind of creepy. in that at least it was just old and creaky and made a lot of noise. Now, this was, I think, shortly after the passing of our family member, and me being sort of a superstitious person, I already had it in my mind that we were going to be haunted, and this isn't going to be any good. And I think it was a Saturday afternoon, and I was home alone. My family had gone, and I was probably just home playing video games or something. And so I was home, and I never really liked being home alone in that house, but it was fine during the daytime because I'm like, well, it's daytime, so whatever. So I walk
Except
over
when
from
you're
the
alone.
den. What's that?
I said, except when you're alone.
Yeah. When
Everyone
you're
knows
alone, then
that.
it becomes a totally different story.
Mhm.
So I walk towards my room, and it's like this little hallway. And so if you're walking towards the end of the hallway. My room is on the left with my brother's room right before it, and then my sister's room right across the hallway on the right. And then there'd be a bathroom at the end of the hallway. So I'm walking towards my room. I'm getting something, and out of the corner of my eye, my brother's room, and I thought I saw something, like you said, like the floater in your eye, like you see something in the corner of your eye. I thought I saw something in his bed, but like I didn't pay any attention because I was like, I brushed it off. So I go into my room, and I'm leaving my room, coming back out into the living room. So my bedroom is on my right hand side now, and his door is open. And I pass by my brother's room, and there is some sort of human shaped dark figure laying in my brother's bottom. He had a bunk bed, so he was in the figure was laying in the bottom bunk of my brother's bunk bed. And as soon as I looked at it, it raised up and hit the top of the bunk bed, like I guess the bottom of the top bunk, like really hard. And I heard a bang, and then all of a sudden my door to my bedroom slammed shut. And at that point, I got my stuff, and I walked out, and I went to a park, and I think I spent like 5 hours at the park until my family came back. I didn't ask any questions. I just literally left, and I was like, nope, I am not doing this. I'm not staying here by myself. There's something after me.
This is why you're alive today. Take note, people. This is actually a PSA.
Yeah, if you hear something go bump in the night, just leave.
Or no, in the daytime.
Or in the daytime. Yeah, apparently.
Oh, that's frightening. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So it was in one room, it hit its head, but then the other door in your
my
bedroom
door, yeah, my brother's door was open, but my door was also open because I just walked out of it, and I didn't like pull it closed or anything.
Right.
But as soon as I like looked at whatever was on the bed, it hit the top bunk with a bang, and then right behind me, like the rooms aren't separated with much room, but maybe a couple feet. Right behind me, my bedroom door just slammed shut, and I was like, "All right, that's it. I don't want to do this. I am leaving."
Yeah. Oh, that's terrifying. Well, and what's weird too is like you mentioned that there had been like a traumatic death that happened too. Do you think it was that person, or do you think it was some other kind of like portal that had created like a vortex of energy or something?
In my world, because apparently I was the only one, aside from my friends, I was the only other person that got this vibe, that saw anything. My friends never saw anything, but they definitely heard things. That's probably because we were just up late enough to actually hear things. But I didn't, I don't know. I didn't, my family didn't really believe me at all. And so like, I just kind of kept my mouth shut about the whole thing. And,
Well, I was just thinking you could have had like a person living in your house. That's a thing.
Oh, no. It wasn't one of those Japanese situations. No, but I do think that it was possible in my imagination, and it was very active when I was younger. It's still quite active. It was that person, and that person was hanging around for a little while. And we had to, and the issue was that the way in which the person passed was incredibly traumatic and not good. And so, yeah, when that happened, I just kept feeling like this presence, like that person was around. The person was around. And so, yeah, I do think that it could have been. It certainly could have been. And I think, when traumatic things like that happen, there's probably a higher chance that you're going to get a ghost.
Yeah, yeah. When you look at like the recipe for like how to make a ghost, it's usually like some sort of trauma,
Right.
and like a sudden death. I think that's usually
Mm-hmm.
how it breaks down, which I also think is really interesting because again, like if you just go into, like our psyches, everything that we tell ourselves, it's a narrative, it's our life story, and that's what shapes us and that creates meaning as we move through this life.
Yeah.
So then when you have a life that ends really quickly, it seems to me only natural that we would create this then and afterlife that helps them ease through, whether that's for our peace of mind, but I could imagine it for them too, because yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what a brain,
Well,
well,
maybe it's like, the laws of thermodynamics and inertia,
thinking
right?
about that.
So suppose like a human life has a certain amount of inertia in it. And if it's stopped short, perhaps the essence of that person, that inertia keeps going for a little longer, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually an interesting idea,
So like if you
especially
rolled
if
like,
it
I'm sorry,
was.
just to give a little bit more of an illustration for our audience. So like you rolled a cannonball down a snowy hill and the snow builds and builds and builds up, but then it hits a rock. The cannonball stops, but that snow keeps going a little bit further.
Mhm.
And so maybe a ghost is nothing more than a life stopped short and the spirit continuing a little bit farther.
Well, and I was thinking kind of along the same lines. We just finished watching the series Devs, which, without spoiling, actually, no, I'm just going to say spoiler alert. If you're watching Devs, mute your thing. So it just basically talks about a fatalistic universe where all of your actions are predetermined. So I wonder if in the situation where there's like a sudden death and there is that big life inertia, maybe they weren't supposed to die, but then
Right.
something happened.
Yeah.
And before a new universe could be created to spin off or whatever, you have this like distortion effect while things are trying to correct itself, perhaps. I
Yeah.
don't know. But I think that's an interesting way to think about it.
It's certainly possible. I mean, if we're going to get into speculation, and now I think this is when we'll jump into with our theorized reasons that perhaps ghosts exist. And, I kind of compiled a few reasons here that I'll kind of list off. But maybe we can start with one that I chose, which is just, I think what we were just talking about. So we might not have to go too farther, but I think energetic residue. Energetic residue, according to metaphysicalstudies.com. Thank you, metaphysicalstudies.com. You're the only source that I could find for the concept that I was talking about, because I'm pretty sure there won't be a Wikipedia entry for energetic residue, but there was somebody that wrote a website about it. So according to them, energetic or energy residue can be found on a person, on an object, a location, or a time. Everything is energy, from our thoughts all the way down to our physical reality. Energy denseness determines how physical the energy manifesting will be or is. We are in a physical interactive reality. We physically interact with our environment. Wherever we go, whatever we touch, whatever we experience, we leave energy residue behind. And I think we talked a little bit about that in our last episode, right? The concept of just perhaps, like we were talking about, like a haunted house, somebody who lived in a house for 60 years.
Or a battlefield for that example.
Or a battlefield, definitely. And maybe that illustrates two different types of or energetic residue. Somebody who lived in a house for 60 years has a very, like I said in our last episode, their energy or their spirit would be permeating from the entire place. And likewise with the battlefield, I think the trauma and how drastic, how horrific the scene would leave an energetic print too. So perhaps it's time or trauma, right? So it's like if you spend a lot of time with something or in a certain spot or in a in a certain environment, then yes, you probably leave a lot of energetic residue. Or if there's a ton of trauma in a certain spot, that is going to hold a lot of energetic residue.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much of it is energetic residue or just some sort of like higher dimensional like slime that we leave or something like that, so when you get into like concepts of, was it the fifth dimension where you have this elongated self, which is yourself as a physical entity moving through time? So it's like
That's
every
fourth.
version of yourself. Is that fourth?
Yeah, the fifth dimension brings you back to a single point again.
Weird. Okay, so yeah. So then I guess it would be the fourth. I mean, like if you think about it in a way where, okay, first of all, like how can that be possible, right? Like what does that even mean? Well, it could just mean that as well, I don't know. Now I kind of lost my point. But I was thinking more along the lines of like maybe it's some sort of kind of like phantom appearance that we can't like that's not woo-woo science, but that's science that we just haven't caught up to or something.
Dimensional rifts. I was actually going to lead on to that. So
Okay. Dimensional rifts.
The next kind of section of explanations I was thinking about would be like the concept of multi-dimensions, like we said with devs. The multiverse theory, dimensional rifts, which is what you could be talking about, parallel dimensions like the one we just discovered apparently, universes bumping into each other, perhaps ghosts are just projections of a parallel universe that, like if there's a parallel universe running right next to us, and sometimes they might just bump into each other and realities might bleed for a brief moment.
Yeah, I like that theory a lot, actually, because I feel like it explains why the last couple of years have been so crazy. I mean, like, I remember the course of events being pretty wild, even in like the 2000s, but something about the last couple of years, like if you like, do this for me on a Sunday, actually buy the New York Times and then just sit there and read it from cover to cover. Even if you don't read the whole thing, just read the headlines and you'll understand what I mean, because the news.
Sorry, I'm not a snob. I won't read the New York Times.
Well, I don't read it all the time either because it's really upsetting to me. But like the last time I did this, and I just went through and I read every single headline about everything, because they have like the international section and then they have like a science section. You just go through that on just any given Sunday and you're just going to be shocked at what information they're referencing that already happened and like what theories they're talking about might happen. And especially in the scientific world where we've got like a sun that's doing some crazy stuff. We've got a planet that's doing some crazy stuff. You just mentioned that they did actually have some weird experiment where did they prove a parallel universe, or did they just say that we rubbed up against one? Or
no,
do you remember that?
Apparently we found a parallel universe that runs backwards.
Beautiful. That's right. Yeah. The running backward parallel universe, and and then you just think about the fact that even today that they have been talking about how like Earth shouldn't exist. That when you had the Big Bang, there should have been an equal amount of matter and antimatter, but this perfect symmetry doesn't exist when you factor in Earth. And so like all the complications that takes on
the
the
universe
place,
was created off of asymmetry. If everything had spread out evenly, there would have no star, no planet, nothing would have been formed. The weird thing is that at some point, the matter that spread out from the Big Bang became disproportionately shifted in one way. And that is what caused planets and stars to form. Had it not, this would have just been a universe of particles all evenly distributed across the universe.
Or maybe that's just the case in our galaxy, because like what I was reading about, and again, look, I'm not a physicist person. This is probably going to be really stupid if I keep reading and like I find out this isn't right. But what I found out today was that antimatter is a mirror image of matter. So it has to be perfectly symmetrical, because you can't have a mirror image.
No, antimatter can be symmetrical, but matter is certainly not.
No, they're saying that there's like as much antimatter for their. Well, I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking right there because now I need a fact check. You're making me think about it. But what I was just kind of trying to highlight was that there's all these new headlines that come out, and in the scientific world of theoretical physics and particle, is it particle physics? Particle,
Quantum.
yeah, all that stuff. I think that they're making wide, like really far leaps every day. So sorry, I got really off into it. I really want to be like a physics expert, guys. This is what I'm hoping to get to.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but our podcast probably isn't going to make you one.
I'm gonna keep reading and watching, and I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Good
No,
stuff.
but I think what you were trying to get to before was the concept, and I think it's been pushed out a lot recently, is the fact that anything exists over nothing existing is a infinitesimally small probability. And we're kind of scratching our heads as to why anything exists in the first place. And that's what I was trying to illustrate when I was explaining the matter distribution of the universe. The problem is if that matter was evenly distributed across the universe, there would be no way for it to conglomerate. It wouldn't be everything would be equidistant from each other, so there would be no gravitational pull that would pull any matter in any direction or another. So in essence, what could have happened from the Big Bang was the Big Bang explodes, shoots out all the particulate into the universe, creates the universe, but then nothing forms. It's just particles uniformly separated from each other. That is way more likely than what happened here in our reality, where apparently something made the matter not uniform and not symmetrical so that it could actually start to take shape. And we don't really know what that is. We think it's dark energy. We think it might have to do with dark matter, but we're not sure.
Maybe it was a ghost. It's like a ghost just was like, I'm just gonna mix everything up or something. No, I don't know. That was a bad joke. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think ghosts, to think about it, it's interesting because like I was saying, I was reading all this stuff beforehand and it was just all saying like, no, it's not possible. But I don't think it's possible in the ghosty sense, but it could be possible in, like you're saying, particle and energies and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's freaky.
Well, a couple other possibilities that I came up with. Glitch in the Matrix. This could be a artifact of the simulation, something that, if we're recording our reality over a previous reality, maybe you would get some sort of transfer there. So maybe ghosts are just the Matrix bugging up and the simulation bugging up so that you get a portal into the past somehow.
But I feel like if that were the case, more and more apparitions would be like some guy on a toilet or like someone cooking. Like, I don't know. Would it or would it not?
Well, I mean, it depends on where because that would go back to like the rift in the dimension. So my opinion is that we only see ghosts from the late 1800s, early 1900s, because there was a fascination among the subconscious culture of the world, a fascination with the occult and the occult mysteries. And so perhaps some magic was done back then that lingered still today.
Ugh, that's creepy.
I mean, it's possible, but that's kind of the way I would think about it, is that if there is some sort of like dimensional rift going on, it's because the fascination with the occult back then was really, really strong. And there were people that were doing black magic and rituals and stuff. So it is possible that those ghosts that we see maybe are people that are trying to look into the future.
Oh, that's creepy. That's creepy. I don't know. Well, yeah, you're making me want to watch like American Horror Story Coven again, just because like the idea of black magic, it's so foreign to me. I don't know. Like that, I don't know. That would be really
we'll
creepy.
get into we're going to have an episode on magic too, I'm sure.
So. Ooh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me get through a couple more here. We're almost running close to time, but I have a couple more that I wanted to bring up. I thought maybe proof of holographic universe, but that's kind of like into the simulation theory as well. But if we're,
Mhm.
like we're talking in the Project Gateway experience, the concept of a holographic universe, I mean, maybe these are just impressions. Like when they explained the holographic universe in the gateway theory, they talked about freezing a cup of water with 3 stones at the bottom of it,
Mhm.
and then taking the ice out and seeing a representation of the 3 stones inside the ice, that being kind of like the hologram. If you project light into it, then it like it shows up.
Mhm.
Perhaps that's the same sort of thing. Maybe something happened in which a snapshot was taken during a specific time, and there's still bleed overs there.
I don't know. It could, yeah. I mean, it could be. I was trying to think a little bit about that in respect to the antimatter and the dark matter, because you have well, I don't know. I mean, they're totally different theories, but I do feel like it's possible. It's
Yeah,
possible.
certainly. Next one I wanted to bring up to you, and this one comes from our good Catholic friends, is the concept of purgatory.
Hmm.
So purgatory, or in Latin purgatorium, is, according to some belief of Christians, mostly Catholics, is the intermediate state after physical death for expiatory purification. Expiatory. I don't think I've ever heard that word before. Expiatory
That's a weird word.
purification. So Dante's Inferno describes purgatory as an endless, windy mountain trail ever reaching to the heavens as climbers lament. Dante did a really good job at making the afterlife as depressing as possible. Except for paradise. Paradise is fine, but man, you don't want to go through the Inferno and purgatory, that's for sure.
No bueno.
No. But purgatory is for those who don't fulfill their lives in one direction or another. So therefore, they lived their life in such a way that they weren't good enough and they weren't evil enough to go in either way. So they have to kind of do a sort of like spiritual audit in this middle ground.
That's, yeah. I don't know. Dante's Inferno. Those are long books. They're hard to get through. I remember reading the Inferno, and then is it the Purgatory, or is it Purgatorium? Does he have like a weird name?
Purgatorio.
Purgatorio. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, the whole idea of like being stuck. I mean, that would be very sad if a ghost was just stuck here. I mean,
Well, the idea of unfinished business. That's why I bring like the purgatory thing, because that's what it's all about. It's that you haven't completed something within your soul that doesn't let you transfer over to the afterlife.
there's a really good show with Jennifer Love Hewitt called The Ghost Whisperer. I highly recommend it. It's all about just like unfinished. She's basically like a therapist to
Right.
ghosts.
It's one of those serialized shows where she meets a ghost every episode.
Oh yeah, it's so Hallmark too. It's really sweet. But I think a part of the show too plays into like morality, and so I think like that's an interesting component of ghostiness too, is that on some level, if you are a ghost, there's a sense of unfinished business, and then a ghost is like a stepping stone to some sort of like eternal judgment or something like that, which I think is kind of an interesting thing to have in your mind, whether you're alive or a ghost. I mean, could you imagine being a ghost and you're thinking you're just on a way station to like doom or pretty okay? Like,
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be fun, that's for sure. But if you want a good representation of that in a show that does that a really fun way, you guys should watch The Good Place. Because they it's a show that deals with the afterlife and the mechanisms of what the afterlife is, and it's really funny, and you guys would probably enjoy that if that stuff interests you. I was gonna say that we're talking about purgatory, and I always thought in my mind personally that purgatory is just an explanation of what Earth is. And if you think about what purgatory is explained as, then it sounds just like Earth. You're in this holding pattern trying to raise or lower your karmic debt in order to transform to the next step of existence, right? Or
Yeah.
digress if you're not doing a very good job.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like, well, I don't know. I've heard that theory before, and I wonder, to what extent knowing that that's the case changes anything. I mean, clearly we were put on this world to not know stuff, right? Otherwise, we would just know, maybe.
Make it really boring if we knew.
Right. But so I'm just wondering, like, could you imagine like working away at your karmic debt every single day until you die, and then you find out that like it was all for nothing? That would be really weird to find out.
But
And
but I think that though, and I think that this will kind of dovetail into my last explanation. Because I think that that's not necessarily true, though. Because if you do live a good life where you're building your, like you're paying off your karmic debt and you're making yourself lighter, the things that you're doing in your life must be inherently good and beneficial to the people around you. So, I mean, is it pointless if there's no afterlife? I don't really think so, because you still spent a life well. That's still a life well lived, because you lived it upright and you lived it as if though there was an afterlife for you to go to. I don't know necessarily if the result is any or not. I guess the result is no different. It's the intention, but I don't necessarily think that the intention matters.
well, I mean, look, I've read so many books about this that I wouldn't even know where to start, and I know we're at an hour, so I don't know. I mean, because like, okay, so if you look at Nietzsche, he's got that idea that like a good life is a life that you would be happy to live repeatedly over and over and over again. You wouldn't change a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So in some respect, it's that sense of like staying true to yourself. But to what extent does staying true to yourself become like flawed because your life experiences cloud your true self? Or
Well, I would say that probably save for the most extreme cases, Nietzsche's idea of a life that's well spent is one that you wouldn't change. I think a lot of people, when looking back upon their life, wouldn't change a lot. There's obviously, if you've had some awful traumas in your life, I'm sure you would want those to be expunged. But even the people who do experience those really terrible traumas, more often than not, they come to the consensus that they wouldn't want to take those away because they've transformed them in some sort of way.
Well, it depends at what point you talk to them, though. If it just happened, they might not be so savvy. But if it was 10 years later and they like built an empire because of
certainly,
what they
but that's what I was talking about. If you're looking back at your life, I'm assuming most of the things that you regret are long gone.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, yeah, and it depends, and that's why it's so hard. I think like you've got like stoicism, you've got like totally like Epicurean, like I'm just gonna live in my senses. I mean, there's so many ways to live your life. So I guess that would make me wonder why there aren't different types of ghosts. Because ghosts usually are just like a little blip, and they're usually like instances where the person's like trying to, I don't know, it's like they're either trying to make contact with you, so they're looking at you, or they're doing some crazy shit. And I don't know, you never see a ghost like clubbing, like, where he was like a big DJ fan or something and then died and is like, woohoo, I still want to club. That's like all I want to do. And they're just ghosting it up at like the Avalon. I don't know if that rant like makes any sense, but
no, it does. Well, I don't think that there are any modern ghosts. I think that if there are ghosts, then they're probably from some sort of dimensional space-time point in which there was some weird stuff going on. But my final explanation is the most logical one, is that this is all just allegory for describing the human condition, and a ghost is a great juxtaposition to the experience of life. It is a harbinger of warning that you don't want to waste the moments you have alive, and that life is precious, and that even if there is something after it, that's not really the point.
Well said.
Well, we hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of Exofathom. Exofathom. My goodness.
I
I'm sorry, you
pronounced it
guys.
the way that the little image looks because the X is like a half X.
I know. Well, I
Like
just might have had a mild
Exofathom.
stroke trying to say it. So,
Oh no.
no, I'm kidding. I really appreciate you guys listening in. Thank you so much. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This won't be the last ghost conversation we have, I'm sure. We got other things coming up for you guys, including the part 4 of our Gateway Experience series. We're going to be coming up with a magic episode soon, maybe a cryptid episode. I don't know. There's tons of stuff for us to get into, guys, and we really appreciate every time you guys listen. It means a lot to both me and Ayla. Please, listen to us wherever you can on thinkring.space. That is our website. That's where we're going to have all of our podcasts for Exofathom and Thinkring. And we got Keelan from Thinkring is going to be creating his own podcast soon. He's going to have a couple episodes coming up soon. So please keep your eyes open for that as well. We're all very stoked for him. So again, thank you so much, you guys, for listening. I hope it was an interesting episode for you guys. And you just stay out there, all you cognonauts, and we will catch you on the next Exofathom.
Oh yeah.